me do the
Hello
intro?
and welcome to
Okay.
Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your host, Buddy Sotelo Esquire, Evan Ginsberg, and Dr. Mike Lino. Mike, would you like to introduce our guest for tonight?
My guest, I sought her out. Everybody is talking about her. Alison Lyn Miller. I believe this is his first book, but Alison, you can clarify for me. Rough House, A Father, a Son, and the Pursuit of Pro Wrestling Glory. Major book and not just well received by people in our wrestling industry, but major ESPN names, people outside of our wrestling school. Allison, it's a pleasure to have you here. Let me just give you a quick bio on her. I'm just going to read straight off of this because she certainly deserves this. Reported about and written about many other things, but about indie wrestling around her home state of Georgia and published related pieces in Sports Illustrated and Gravy, as well as other publications. She's also written for the Atlanta Journal and Constitution, which is the top state of Georgia newspaper, the Washington Post, Garden and Gun magazine, which I actually get. And she lives in Athens, Georgia. So much history in the state of Georgia, the Peach State. Allison, tell us. I'm sure Russ can follow up on this, but how did you get interested in pro wrestling? I mean, we are extending Women's History Month, which is a short month in March, into April, having female guests from all genres of fighting sports. But tell us about your kind of path, because this is kind of a big deal, and your book is a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, it started in 2019. I went to a local wrestling show here in Athens, Georgia, where I live. It was just something to do on a Saturday night. Um, I turned 7 in 1990, so I was a little kid at the kind of peak of the golden era. And of course, I knew wrestling was around. I mean, it was in popular culture at that time in a way that it's not quite now. So of course, I was familiar with it. I did not, however, know that there were small shows happening on the indie level all over the country and especially here in Georgia. So that was immediately what interested me, not so much WWE and AEW, but like these small town shows that were happening every weekend around the state. And so my curiosity was sparked, and I mean, my career is a writer, a magazine writer, always in journalism and nonfiction writing. So I started interviewing people, and I found pretty immediately that I uncovered the depth of fandom, and the depth of fandom not only from within the people in the seats, but the people that were in the ring. And so my questions were always, we're always about what led you here as opposed to what happened in the ring last night.
I feel really old because I've been watching wrestling since 1966. I actually had photo essay on from 1974 at the Atlanta City Auditorium. It was an NWA Atlanta office, big, huge show. I've told this story many times. Evan's sick of hearing about it, but Fred Blassie not selling in the main event. He was just there visiting family against Cowboy Bill Watts, who was helping book that office. But I also had photos in the same Atlanta City newspaper on outlaw shows, which was, we really didn't have indie wrestling back then. That was when our
Yeah.
territories died, if you know territory wrestling. But that office was huge, and there was a great female. Her husband had passed away. Her name, this is what happens when you hit 70. I'll
Was it
remember
Ann
her name.
Gunkel?
Yeah, Annie Gunkel, who was uh, what was his, anyway, her husband had died in a match with Ox Baker, not through anything Ox had done, but he had a heart attack in the back.
Roy Gunkel.
Yeah, Roy Gunkel, Ray Gunkel. It
Ray
was Ray
Gunkel.
Gunkel.
Ray Gunkel, yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was one of like three people who died after wrestling Ox Baker, but he had nothing to do with it, although his finisher was the hard punch. But that was at the Atlanta City Auditorium. She ran opposition for almost 2 straight years against the Atlanta Paul Jones office, which had heavyweight booking geniuses, plus Eddie Graham's Mine from Florida, Bill Watts, Tom Ernesto, all these guys. And she
Mhm.
beat them on attendance with guys like total legends, Ernie Ladd, Bruno Sammartino, Ox Baker, who left the Atlanta office. Many, many guys came to work for her and helped her for that period. So a lot of female history there, because she was like the very first female promoter
Yeah.
But so I don't know if you're aware of the territories, but we had like every major city in the U.S. as well as the rest of the world had promotions there, and you didn't break the boundaries. Now with indies, like I don't know. I don't know. I was going to ask you if you went to Vegas because that's like Indy City. The whole week surrounding WrestleMania, people go to wherever WrestleMania is. In this case, they return to Vegas to see promotions they couldn't see elsewhere, like indies from Canada and Marvelous, a new promotion of just women's wrestling from Japan was there. So you can see like up to 10 shows a day the whole week before and not even have to bother with WWE's overpriced thing at that major stadium. Did you
Yeah.
happen to go or were you aware of what was going on?
Yeah, I mean, I've known that that happens. I mean, for years that the indies kind of surround they all show up to wherever WrestleMania is. No, I didn't go. I've actually never been to a WrestleMania. But I love that. I love that. That's just like this traveling mecca that happens, and that often um, the best shows are not the ones that are happening in the big arena.
No, no, far from it. I want to bring up both of Evan and Russ, but Evan in particular, who's put out a ton of wrestling books, all excellent. And he can tell you, other than me, I mean, Evan knows indies inside and out, even co-produced and was a mega part of 350 Days. So, Evan, let me throw to you. Then
Hi.
Russ.
My experience with indies has been that it's almost like a surrogate family. At times, the wrestlers have had tough upbringings in certain instances, and the promoter might be a surrogate father or even a surrogate mother if you're talking about an aunt, uncle. So my question is this. Recently, recently ESPN has been showing WWE, and part of the audience and even some of the sports writers, professional sports writers, have been critical of it because I think even today there's a stigma attached to wrestling. You know, I've gotten a lot of "What's an intelligent fellow like you doing involved in wrestling all these years?" And we made the wrestler with Mickey Rourke. I mean, so you could create art with wrestling because wrestling is an art if you appreciate it. I forget the writer's name, but recently a sportscaster was very dismissive of wrestling appearing on ESPN, and he got a lot of heat for it because he came off as very smug. What's your take on all of this? Because I love the art of pro wrestling when it's done right, when it's not a circus. And WWE can turn it into a circus at times. But you're talking in your book indies, and what's your take on all of this wrestling being dismissed by some?
Yeah, I mean, try selling a book to a major New York literary publisher. I mean, I know I heard that constantly. I think there's this really tired old stereotype that persists that wrestlers and wrestling fans don't read and they're not intellectual and they're, a bunch of hillbilly idiots, and what I found and why I wanted to write the book was to dismantle that stereotype. I mean, wrestling is one of these things that exists that has such a varied audience. I mean, all kinds of people all over the world love wrestling. I mean, and that's just evident. I mean, what other what can compare to that? So yeah, I mean, I encountered that for sure. I'm still encountering that. I think that a lot of people, when they see pro wrestling on the front of my book, I think they don't pick it up, because they have a preconceived notion about it. And of course, my book it's not necessarily about wrestling. It's a family story. It's a universal story. It's a book about America. It's a book about, anyone who has a dream and has inherited any kind of legacy can relate. So my goal is to actually get it in front of as many non-fans as I can. But of course, I'm always thrilled when actual wrestling fans read it and appreciate it, because that was one of the things I worried about most was, not having been entrenched in wrestling as a fan for decades, like so many of the people that I interviewed have been. Um, at first, I thought that was going to be a disadvantage, but I actually now believe it to be an advantage because I did never take wrestling for granted. I asked a lot of dumb questions, and part of that was because I wanted to be able to write it in a way that anyone could come to the book. You don't have to know anything about wrestling at all. Those are the readers that I'm just always trying to acquire.
So I have a question. So how did you find Hunter James, and how were you able to, get involved with his indie experience? I mean, first of all, how did you know that he was going to be, a big indie wrestler, that he was even going to succeed? And then was he okay with you chronicling, his story? Because I know I've been in the indies myself, and it's a really there's some really tough times that you go through when
Well,
you
Russ has actually managed on tons of indies, and he's promoted. California Championship Wrestling, was that the name of your?
yeah, and all pro wrestling, and now it's wrestling for charity. But tell me your story about how you got connected with it.
Yeah. I mean, I met him in a backyard ring when he was 16 years old. And he was training after high school wrestling practice. Um, and he at the beginning I was talking to everyone I could. So this was one night early in my reporting where I was at this guy Jamie Holmes's house, and he'd been a wrestler for almost more than half his life, and he was only 30 at the time. So, but part of what his role is within kind of the community of Georgia wrestling is he trains people kind of unofficially in his backyard. So there was Hunter. And it wasn't until probably 2 years later when I was sitting down and really working on the book proposal, and I was trying to make sense of all these interviews and these experiences that I had had, and looking at the most compelling characters that Hunter kind of rose to the top because I met him at such a formative time in his life, not only in his wrestling career, but his life as a human. Um, to watch someone grow from a 16-year-old to a 23-year-old is pretty important time in one's life. So it became pretty clear that he needed to be the central character, and also with the added dynamic of the relationship with his father, which was quite fraught for a while because of wrestling. I loved that for them, wrestling was the thing that both bound them for most of their lives and also kind of broke them apart from each other for a time. Yeah, I had no idea if he was, I didn't know how my book was going to end. I was writing it as it was happening. I was also interviewing Carly Bravo, who now works with AEW, so and several other wrestlers. So yeah, I mean, Hunter's not made it to a WWE roster yet. Will he? I don't know. I don't think anyone knows with this industry, but
I heard
did.
there were some job openings that just happened.
Yeah.
A couple of days ago.
So they released 20 people, the top of which is Carrie Sane, who's an incredible former Stardom multi-world champion female wrestler who's absolutely, that's
Yeah.
a travesty.
And I
But
think
it's more
that's, yeah.
TKO. This is the problem, and that's why people absolutely love indies. Uh, where Russ and I worked for APW, pretty much from day one in Northern California. And Evan is in New York, so he's seen every great indie there. I wouldn't even call Ring of Honor an indie, but
Yeah.
it was. And of course, we're speaking with Alison Lyn Miller, the book Rough House, A Father, a Son, and the Pursuit of Pro Wrestling Glory. Very quickly, particularly in Japan and Mexico, second, third, and even fourth generation wrestlers are huge. The Hardys started their own backyard federation, and look where they are now. They're the greatest tag team of all time, and um, they've trained so many people, helped the industry on so many levels. But you don't have to be WWE or AEW. There are others, the next tier down, but still huge. MLW, GCW. There's lots of not independent, but sort of independent and big and professional. They tour globally. They've got television, so you can be pretty much anywhere. Also, that's topical. This is the names involved in this, it's a new Apple Plus TV show. Haven't seen it yet. Margot's Got Money Troubles, where Elle Fanning and Nicole Kidman are playing pro wrestlers. Nicole Kidman is a wrestler slash attorney. She has an intergender match with comedian actor Nick Offerman. Michelle Pfeiffer and her husband produced this, David Kelly. So you
Hmm.
couldn't be more topical with your book, Rough House.
Yeah,
Uh,
I hope so. I mean, that book, that was a book first. Margot's Got Money Trouble, and it was written by this woman named Ruthie Thorpe, who didn't have any interest in wrestling until the pandemic when she found herself with an abundance of time at
wow.
home. And she's like a huge fan now. So part of writing that book was allowed her to have some fun with her own fandom. And yeah, so I mean, I'm telling everyone I know about that show. And why is it great? Because it's getting wrestling in front of an audience that otherwise wouldn't be watching it. And hopefully, yeah, hopefully they see that and want to know more, and they find their local indie shows, and maybe they find my book, maybe they find your show. I mean, there's such a vast world of fandom.
It's so
Now,
important that you've done this book. Wait a sec, Russ, and then I'm going to throw it back to Russ and Evan. Uh, One of my ringside photographer sisters, I've been doing it for a zillion decades. Joyce Paushin put out a book. Uh, Basically, the very few female wrestling books we've had, Natty Neidhart, Becky Lynch, they're
Mhm.
autobiographical. So yours is completely different. Wouldn't say it's an outsider, but you're not focused on yourself or going out
Mhm.
inwards. So that is why your book is so important. Russ, let me pitch back to you and Evan.
yeah, as a woman, did you find it was more of a challenge, or did you find any exceptional challenges approaching wrestling, as not only an outsider, but as a woman? Most of the books that we know of have been written by guys. So did you find that there was like any opposition or any obstacles that you experienced because you're female and writing this book?
I mean, not that I know of. I think that I kind of earned trust by showing up again and again and again to these shows. And I wasn't just going for 15 minutes, interviewing a couple people and leaving. I would sit, I would kind of pivot back and forth between the locker room and the show, and I would, almost always stay in through the end of the show. So
You
yeah, I
fold
mean,
any chairs?
no, I did
No,
have,
okay. That's
I
that's how
did
you
have,
really know you're part of the
you
audience
know,
or the in
I,
the
I always like being in the front row, but I, did have to get up and move several times to avoid being, hit by a body flying out of the ring. um, so yeah, I never had anything but a welcoming from the people that I was around. And of course, I would respect boundaries too. And I think as a journalist, one of the things you have to do is kind of read the room. So if they were having a meeting about the show, I wouldn't, I just knew when to not push for things. Um, so, and yeah, and then I did a lot of follow-up interviews too. I would talk to people after these events to get kind of their interior dialogue about what happened and this and that. But yeah, no, I didn't have any issue with that.
Before I throw to Evan, I don't want to lose this thought. Have you been or sat in on booking meetings where the creative stuff happens and people are told who's going over or who's going under, all of that stuff? Because now it's a completely different atmosphere. When I'm backstage, there'll be kids' spouses or the children, the spouses,
Mhm.
dogs,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
none of us, not even ring. It was a big deal to be allowed backstage into
Yeah.
Vince McMahon Senior show in '74. Uh, they just, you just weren't allowed. And another thing that's very cool is when wrestlers call fellow wrestlers the boys, that term includes
Yeah.
women.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's very refreshing because it is a brother and sisterhood. They are surviving
Mhm.
choreographed, predetermined stuff, which has a risk of paralysis and all these other things. Ev, you've seen it. Tell her a little about 350 Days, your film, and you brought in all of the wrestling talent for Darren Aronofsky's The Wrestler, the Mickey Rourke movie you mentioned at the top of the show, which should have won Mickey Rourke. I mean, he won all the other awards. It should have won him Best Actor and Best
Yeah.
Film, but
He won the Golden Globe and he lost to Sean Penn for milk in 2008 when we made it. And yeah, we have less than 15 minutes of actual wrestling in there. So much like Rocky has less than 15 minutes of boxing. So as Allison was saying, you're trying to create a story. It's not so much wrestling per se. And in 350 days, it was why the title. These guys, the NWA champions at least, they were on the road literally 350 days a year, had no home life, didn't see their kids grow up. Marriages, one after another, went by the wayside. And that was the story more so than the actual in-ring action. Their lives, sex, drugs, rock and roll. It was an insane lifestyle that left a mile-long, dead wrestlers before their time is the only way to put it, unfortunately. So here's my question, Allison. I find that wrestling fans who read wrestling books, and there are many, many wrestling books, for the most part, I don't want to make a stereotype, their perception of a great wrestling book is a bombardment of information, statistics, title changes. This happened on such and such a day. This happened on, they're coming from a different place than a reader who's going to go pick up a novel. And this is difficult. I mean, when I wrote my book, Wrestling Rings, Blackboards, and Movie Sets, I got the idea from Sandra Cisneros, A House on Mango Street, to tell these poignant vignettes about wrestlers' lives, the sacrifices they make, the pain, physical, psychological, emotional pain that they go through, being away from their families, not seeing their kids grow up, not being there for the kid's birthday, the kid's graduation, whatever the case may be. So back in the past, some of the biggest wrestling shows were on Thanksgiving and Christmas, not being home for the holidays.
Yeah.
And so when you wrote the book, what was your goal as far as the writing itself? What was your goal?
I mean, my goal was to take readers to a place that they wouldn't otherwise go, and to understand something that maybe they thought they knew something about, and really that was my experience in writing it, is kind of the experience that I want the readers to have. And part of the book is a defense of professional wrestling as this really unique and unparalleled American pastime that is just too widely dismissed, in my opinion, and that holds a lot of potential even now. I mean, I talk a lot about it's play fighting if you really minimize it, right? And play fighting is innate. It's what kids do. It's what dogs do. It's
Good analogy.
But at some point people stop doing it, right? Because we become adults. I think I've seen it. I've seen the healing power of this kind of performative violence. I think it has a lot to offer.
I mean, you say that we get out of it as adults, but plenty of adults watch kung fu movies and Rocky, and watch the Karate Kid and all the things that nobody gets punched out in a Bruce Lee film. Nobody actually gets hit in the face.
Yeah, that's kind of what in the book.
Well, actually, guys did get hurt on Bruce Lee films.
Well, yes, not on purpose.
Exactly. Get hurt too, to your point. But it's like it's actors performing their own stunts. So I find if you can kind of just explain this to outsiders in a very simple way, that if they kind of have this aha moment of like, oh wow, okay, because a lot of people just don't understand it because they haven't ever bothered to experience it or watch it or anything. And I also to get people to care about something, you have to do it through a person's personal story. I mean, that's the most effective way. So, I mean, I've always been interested in ordinary people doing kind of extraordinary things, and this absolutely qualifies as that. I also knew that no one else was going to write this book. I mean, I think, yeah, those wrestling biographies are great. And to your point about fans, I mean, I read a lot of those books that were wrestling, the history of wrestling and all the eras and territories, because I knew I needed to educate myself on that. But I wanted to tell stories of people whose stories would never be told anywhere else. That was important to me.
Have you been watching? They've had a few on Vice, depending on Tales of the Territories, but some of the dark sides,
Yeah.
they've gone into some guys, getting hurt on the Indies, and there've been other docus on other,
Mhm.
and now it's kind of mind blowing. There've been so many Von Erichs from a sort of the fictionalized book or movie that came out that it
Mhm.
really took
Yeah.
liberties with stuff for those of us who knew and were there. I was at the Dallas Sportatorium a
Mhm.
ton in the 70s and saw stuff happening. But also, let me ask you, tell us about that poster. Is that the Athens National Guard Armory behind you, the yellow
No,
poster, and
actually,
who's on it?
I was gonna quiz you guys on this poster because I got it in Nashville at a screen printing shop, and can you
So
guys
it's
see?
legit, right?
I mean,
Okay,
a reprint.
that's okay. I just can't
But
see the names.
it's from Lebanon, Tennessee, but it's Jimmy Hart. I don't know if these. I mean,
Well,
Jimmy Hart's
Jimmy
A
Hart.
Team, Dusty
No, Jimmy.
Rhodes.
That's
Looks
yeah. I
like
can't.
Dirty Roads.
Yeah, there was a
Yeah.
wrestling character. Oh,
Harley Davidson and Dirty Roads against Jimmy Hart's Moondogs.
yeah. That's like
Yeah, that's
that's
legit.
like
Yeah.
early '70s, late '80s.
that's
Jimmy
great.
Hart
Yeah,
was the heel manager for all of the Memphis Nick Goulas and
yeah.
later Jerry Jarrett. And it came right off, Harley Davidson. It was hilarious. But there was a guy who was trying to rip off Dusty Rhodes, Dirty Rhodes.
Yeah.
And Jimmy Hart did manage. It was another incarnation of the Moondogs, the very first Moondog ever. Of course, I saw the best Lonnie Moondog Maine, and everybody from Eddie
And I know
Moretti,
who Harley
etc.,
Davidson
copied.
was. That's Hillbilly Jim.
Yeah.
I think
See,
it
I knew
is.
I knew you guys would know. That's why I was like,
Yeah.
I hope they ask because
But let me ask you, what other sports do you like? I'm sure you've written about, Major League Baseball, etc. We almost thought that we were going to get what's his face from, the so-called greatest quarterback of all time. Why can't I think of him from the New England Pats? He was
oh.
supposed to have gotten involved, but we all know that Joe Montana from the 49ers are the greatest of all time. But um, what other sports do you follow, and do you have the sort of the same passion for wrestling, or is it more? Evan? What do you call it? The art for the proletariat, or what do you? A lot of
Pro
different names of
wrestling
wrestling.
is the
Opera, fighting opera.
proletarian performance art, theater for the people. Good guys versus bad guys.
Yeah.
Fighting opera
Yeah.
is what I call pro wrestling. But
Yeah.
there
I mean,
are, particularly with indies. Well, the way the territories, the guys from 1880s and earlier France were sort of pro wrestling
mhm.
had its roots, and then the carnival, traveling carny days. Anything could happen, and a lot of those wrestlers, the at shows that were like in the 30s, 40s. I know Red Bastien told me all about that stuff. You would just listen to the crowd, and you would gauge. You would never have. All you would know is the finish. What had to happen in the end?
Mhm.
You're dropping the title, or who's winning, who's
Yeah.
losing, and the guys would sit and play uh, cribbage and chess and checkers and card games in the back. They would never discuss the match in advance. It wasn't a Randy Savage, Ricky Steamboat thing where
Mhm.
you memorize 328 moves in succession, what was going to happen, which takes away the spontaneity, which we love about the indies now. And you
Mhm.
listen to the crowd, and then you react, and you just gauge it on that. That's so basically all they had was the finish. They'd go out there. They wouldn't even talk to each other if they were true professionals. And there are true professionals on the indie levels. Those outlaw shows I saw in Calhoun, Georgia, and some other cities where I have
Yeah.
family, uh, were I had actually a lot more fun at those shows than I did at the bigger, ones, or now it's very hard for me to watch it because there's no spontaneity. There's a lot of less joy and fun, and this listening
Mhm.
to the audience and acting accordingly. And Ev and Russ, you've seen that as well on all sorts of shows. We've been to all of this cadre of shows, but anyway, I guess it goes without saying. It sounds like you love and enjoy wrestling for what it is, performance art and a sports uh, sort of a ring, as opposed to what pro wrestling would look like if it was legit, which is like UFC or
Yeah.
Slapfest or things that I also have to cover. So maybe tell us about that. Do you watch Ultimate Fight? Have you seen a lot of that stuff? Because Ronda Rousey and Gina Carano have a huge fight here in LA very shortly next month.
Yeah, I don't follow it. I mean, I hear about these bigger face-offs and stuff, but I don't really have any interest in that. I think what makes wrestling interesting to me is the storytelling element and the theatrical element, because it's creative. It's not just, the best man or woman wins. It's how are we going to tell the best story? And I'm just so impressed by like the encyclopedia of moves that even these indie performers kind of draw from. That's complete improvisation. Like you said, I was there for some of those booking meetings, so I would be in the locker room walking around as opponents were kind of getting ready and kind of running through the match, and it's like they're putting it together based on their experiences, and they kind of meet each other where they are. And I mean, there's so much nuance to it, and it's not something that the average person could just go do. So that I just immediately gained a lot of respect for it.
Allison, who's your favorite wrestler?
Well, Hunter James, of course.
One that
um,
we might have seen.
I
One that
mean,
we.
I have to say, and this probably makes me a mark, well, among you guys, but like I really like following the Cody Rhodes stories because he's from Georgia. He kind of won me over when I watched his documentary. And hearing him, he had the leg up of his father, kind of just, he was able to skip quite a few steps early in his career. But and then he actually left, also because they were giving him these goofy gimmicks. But he went back to the bottom. He went back to these indie shows, and he was performing in high school gyms and stuff. And that made him a better wrestler and a better performer because he was able to connect with the fans. So yeah, I listen to his podcasts. I'm trying to get the book in front of him and would love to talk to him in the same way that I interviewed many of the people that I did for my book.
The
And of
weirdest
course,
thing.
AJ, also being
Oh,
from
AJ
Georgia.
Styles. Yeah, I was going to say there are a plethora. The names would blow you away. Arn Anderson, that all were born, raised,
Yeah.
broke in Ted Allen, Buddy Killer
Yeah.
Austin, who was Fred Blassie's major heel tag partner,
Mhm.
Crusher Jerry Blackwell, Braun Breaker, the Steiners, but that's where he was born. Bad Bad Leroy Brown. There's just a crazy Lou
Yeah.
Brown, Jonathan Gresham, who's an announcer, Marty Jannetty, famous for teaming with Shawn Michaels, Kenny Shamrock, that's pretty major.
Yeah.
Scotty Riggs, Otis Sistrunk, who's a football player I think he played for the Atlanta.
I
Ron
interviewed him once a
Starr.
long time ago.
Yeah, but Cody, when he left WWF, well, yeah, it was already WWE. He
Yeah.
came into the Indies, and I photographed him at a ton of Indies, not just All Pro Wrestling, our home
Yeah.
base in Northern California, where he was like wrestling um, Penta, and he had an intergender tag match with Tessa Blanchard, who's back in TNA. Do you
Mhm.
watch some of these other shows? What shows, if any, are
I
you watching? The
You
bigs
know,
like
I
TNA or
actually, I don't really watch it on TV or on my computer. I will never turn down the opportunity to go to a live wrestling show, an indie show. Um, but I don't follow it by, I don't watch Raw. I don't watch, all these weekly shows. Because I've just always, because I came into it on the indies, that's just kind of where my interest remains. And I hear about because I listen to some of the podcasts and stuff. It's like I hear about the bigger things that happen, but yeah, I don't really.
But have you been to, like, I think WWE and TNA have been in about it, or AEW rather.
Yeah. Yeah, I went
Have
to
you
an
been to?
AEW show when they came to Athens, actually. Yeah, a lot. They all go to Atlanta, but AEW actually came to Athens. So yeah, that was my first kind of big-ish show. And it was fun, but it was also just not nearly as intimate, obviously, as being in a small venue. So it just felt a little distant to me. And like, the forced kind of TV commercial breaks and that kind of thing because it was a taped show. Um, yeah, I didn't like
No,
it
no
as much.
vendor tables. That's the charm of indies.
I
Is
mean,
the fans can get, Evan will tell you this right now. You can get close to right
yeah.
there, smack dab. We have a promotion in Oakland, California, Hood Slam, where I had a hard time shooting ringside because all the fans are allowed to be ringside too, and I go, I got to do my job here. But that's the
Yeah.
charm. You can go up and meet with them and do the
Mhm.
photo Polaroid thing and all of
Yeah.
that at intermission, and
Yeah.
that's kind of really what I love. But Evan, let me let you and Russ talk about the magic of indies because we love them too.
Yeah.
I have a two-part question, and this is a tough one. Knowing what you know about wrestling now, would you want a son or daughter to be a wrestler? And living the writer's life, would you want a son or daughter to be a writer? Because it is challenging.
Yeah.
I was a writing major, and our professors were like, get a teaching license and teach English because making a
Mhm.
living as a writer is very challenging. So what's your take on
Yeah,
those?
well, it's funny you bring that up as a dual question because somewhere along the reporting of this book, I realized that there's a lot of similarities between being an indie wrestler and a freelance writer in that it's just such a hustle and it's all about self-promotion and getting yourself in the right place and kind of putting your work out there. Yeah, I guess uh I would prefer I have a 12-year-old daughter. I would prefer she be a writer.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah, it's both are very tough businesses,
Yeah.
and it there are, as I said before, there are hundreds of wrestling books out there, with the vast majority being autobiographies,
Yeah.
or fans covering some territory or whatnot. So you have a unique, book right there. Sheldon Goldberg's done fictionalized books on
Mhm.
wrestling
He just turned out
families.
his fifth one on that,
Yeah.
and they're all in a series.
But for the most part, quality, well-written fictional books are tough. They're very tough, and wrestling writing in general is a tough business because there are 2 million books put out a year now, and the vast majority of them, because of the technology, the vast majority do not sell particularly well. So it's a
Mhm.
full-time job promoting the
Yeah,
book, as
it
Allison's
is.
saying. Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
it
yeah.
is. Yeah.
And in fact, at the very end, we're going to let you plug anything and everything, your social, where people can buy
Okay.
Rough House, A Father, Son, The Pursuit of Pro Wrestling Glory. Author Alison Lyn Miller graciously joins us here. Russ, have you
Now,
got any
yes,
questions? Tell us about.
Allison.
Oh, good.
Because there's this one thing that we cover a lot on the show is the family dynamic involved in
Mhm.
wrestling. We've had a lot of the children of famous wrestlers on our show, from Travis Orndorff, who was Paul Orndorff's son, to Harley Race's son, to Kelly Slaughter, who was the daughter of Sergeant Slaughter. So, and we just had
Mhm.
the daughter of the Dynamite Kid on our show. And so, um, first of all, did your family know about you writing this book, and what did they think about you, like
Oh yeah, I
especially
mean they were
your
there for
parents?
it. We all would go together. I mean, early in my reporting, my daughter she was probably 5 or 6 when this started, and I was able to I took her to her first wrestling show, and I was able to watch her child brain kind of make sense of it. And that was a very magical thing to see because we show up to this space and and this was a match where there was blood, And so I like the first thing I said was, hey, this is a show and they're going to be okay. And then like the horror on her face like just pivoted instantly
Oh,
to
gee.
thrill. And you know, now when she goes, she's like one of the loudest hecklers. She absolutely loves it. So and that's another reason why these shows are so great, is that you get to kind of, you know, where else can you yell like that in public? And the yelling is important. It's
It's
crucial for the
cathartic.
yeah. So she was actually the final scene of the book. She happened to be with me that day. As I was going back to my recording from that day in the interviews, I could hear her in the background. It's like, yeah, I mean, my husband went with me too. And certainly, you know, we talked about Thanksgiving and Christmas. One of the scenes in the book is on Christmas night. I think it was in 2021. And I left home and went to the Landmark Arena in North Georgia, and it was completely sold out, and it was packed full of people, and it was just one of the most meaningful nights because it reflected uh, just how dedicated the community is to these wrestlers. So I'm so glad I went. But yeah, it was when you spend this many years writing a book about a particular community and people, it becomes part of your life too.
Well, you've done Rough House. Are there going to be more pro wrestling books, or what are your next upcoming projects? Other
I mean, I
genres?
don't, I don't have another wrestling book in mind. Not that I'm opposed to anything. But I haven't started another book project yet. But I'm endlessly curious about, you know, communities formed around a shared passion. So especially ones that are a little bit on the fringe. So we'll see.
Now, in your book,
Hmm.
the what you said that there was the father-son dynamic in the book. Can you explain a little bit about how that what happened and how that transpires
Yeah.
without any spoiling of anything?
Yeah, so Hunter's dad was a wrestler in Georgia also when he was younger. He, you know, like nearly everyone who does this doesn't make it out of Georgia. And so he, you know, he loved it. He grew up with it. But at some point when Hunter was a kid, he stopped wrestling because he wanted to be around, you know. I forget who was talking about, I guess it was you, Evan, about the toll that wrestling as a career, even on the indies, you know,
Yeah.
even on the indies, you're not home on Friday and Saturday nights. So he wanted to be there for his boys. And yet he still watched wrestling with them all the time. So there was like this, you know, Hunter before he could talk was, you know, acting out wrestling finisher moves. It was that kind of innate connection to wrestling. So you know, Billy Ray and Hunter's mom Jen really were doing everything they can to get him to go to college. They wanted, you know, he was going to be the first in his family to go to college, and everything was kind of pointing that direction. Well, obviously, Hunter's not in college. He is pursuing a pro wrestling career. So um, that was a turning point for the book, and that was the thing that broke them apart for a while. Billy Ray was extremely frustrated, disappointed with him. He told me that he knew Hunter would chase this dream at some point, but he was really hoping that he would do it after earning a 4-year degree. And he also knew that if he started, you know, when he did, which is when he was 18, he was never going to go to college. So they didn't talk for a long time. And actually, Billy Ray didn't want to talk to me when I started writing the book,
Yeah.
which was going to be a problem. So I just had to be patient. I waited, you know, I just waited around until I could sense that maybe he was ready. And the first time I interviewed him, it was at a gym, and I was able to watch him and Hunter work out together and kind of observe and record their conversation and also interject my own questions. And that was a really fruitful reporting trip for me. Um, so yeah, it's been I've loved the experience of writing this book.
What do both the father and son think of the book now that it's just out?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a completely true story. It's nonfiction. I hired a fact checker. It's a work of journalism. So as such, I was not going to share the book with them until it came out or until it was past the point where they could ask me to make any changes. So, yeah, I sent them a very, very early copy, and one of the most gratifying things that I heard from Hunter, because after he read the book, we talked on the phone for probably close to 2 hours as he was just kind of going through it. I was like, how'd you do this? And like, what about that? And I think he was just, I don't think he knew what exactly it was going to be. But the thing that he said that meant a lot to me was, I feel like you know me better than I know myself. And in some ways, that's not all that surprising because he's so young. I mean, reflection is not something that people who are 17 years old do. But part of my job as the writer was to connect the thoughts and the words that I had heard from his father to the things that Hunter was saying, to tell this family story in a way that even he wouldn't have been able to. So yeah, I was really happy with that. And he and Billy Ray joined me on my opening book event night here in Athens at Barnes and Noble. And I did 17 book tour events, and Hunter came along with me on 4 or 5 of them. And those were always my favorite because I just loved having him in front of a crowd and talk about his experience, the other side of it. We did a local news segment together about the book. So yeah, he's been really generous with his time, and I'm really grateful for that.
Well, Ev, I'll throw to you and then we're going to let you plug anything and everything, all your socials.
Yeah. So yeah, the book is Rough House. It's available wherever books are sold. Check your indie bookstore. It's at a lot of indie bookstores. If not, they can get it. It's published by Norton, so any bookstore can get it. It's also at Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. Obviously, you can get it on Amazon. My website is AlisonLynMiller.com. It's 1 L and 1 N. And that's the same for my Instagram as well. And that's where I post a lot of updates and all kinds of things about the book. But I love to hear from people who've read it. That's another really, for writing a book, you spend all these years kind of by yourself doing it, and it's really thrilling for it to be out in the world, and for me to receive calls and emails and messages from people who have come upon it on their own.
That's awesome. Ev?
Have you worked the indie circuit on gimmick tables or wrestling conventions? Because that might be a target audience in that area.
I haven't been to any of those yet, but there's one in Winston-Salem this fall, and then there's also the big one in Atlanta also in the fall. So I've been in touch with them and hope to do something there. And Hunter also sells the book at his shows.
Right.
Did you ever see the television show Heels?
Yes.
Oh yeah, it was
that makes me think a lot about your area and everything that goes on.
And actually one of the things that is happening now is that there's been some interest from the TV and film industry. So I would love to see this book have a second life as a film or TV series or documentary or something. So we'll see.
There's a great documentary, Fake It So Real. I don't know if you've seen this.
I have not seen that one.
Yeah. And Roger Ebert, one of the greatest critics of all time, raved about it. That's how I hooked into it, because I'm like, this is unusual. A legitimate critic, raving about a wrestling project. And it's a tremendous film. It's about a small indie promotion, and none of them are even getting paid. And, they're getting injured, and they have family drama, and, and basically the point of the film is the ring is their canvas. The ring is their escape. The ring is where they're happy. And, when they're dealing with their horrible job or family issues or whatnot, it's a different scenario, and I really recommend
a theme we also see in The Wrestler, a theme that's also part of The Wrestler.
Oh, yeah. I took Aronofsky and the crew on the road for 6 months. We went to CZW Cage of Death. It was like a mass unit backstage. It was insane. I mean, you can't imagine. And these guys are making no money. They're getting stitched up. It's crazy. So yeah, I've heard indie wrestlers refer to younger wrestlers as my wrestling son, my wrestling daughter. It's an interesting dynamic if people really understand it, because and I'm glad you covered it because as small indie or indie wrestlers is not the most commercial project. So you had the courage to dive into this. This isn't like you were mentioning Cody Rhodes, who had millions of followers and millions of fans. His book obviously has a built-in audience. You know what you're doing is very challenging. Yeah,
it is.
But we're giving it 10 out of 5 Meltzer stars.
Yes. Okay. That's awesome.
So,
I really appreciate you guys having me on and helping me get it out there.
thank you again. Roughhouse, A Father, Son, and the Pursuit of Pro Wrestling Glory, the author, Alison Lyn Miller, Alisonlyn, Miller, you can spell it. Thank you,
How can
everybody.
people get a hold of you on like social media?
Yeah, it's I'm on Instagram. It's Alison Lyn Miller. X is the same. Also, they're all the same. It's just my full name. Yeah.
Wonderful.
All right, everybody. Domo
When you get
arigato,
ready for your
kombate
next
kudasai.
projects, please come back on the show again. We'd love to have you. And any updates, we'd love to have you back on the show.
That's great. I will. Absolutely.
Thanks, Alison,
Thank
for
you.
going
All right.
on.
Thank you,
We
guys.
appreciate you.
Thank you for being here this week. See everyone next week. Good night,
Okay,
everyone.
bye.